Chivalry isn't dead, but let's talk about how that looks in your dates, because I know that when we talk about chivalry, we could be talking about holding the door open, opening the car door, who pays for the date. So a lot of people believe that chivalry is included in who picks up the bill. Walking on the outside of someone when you're walking near the street. So there's all these little pieces of what we consider chivalrous behavior. So I want to talk to you about what that looks like for you, or what it could look like for your potential date. So depending on whether or not you want somebody who does these things, or maybe your date is expecting these things from you. So let's hit home on some of the smaller ones first. So let's first talk about walking on the outside. It's really old school. It's okay if you look for that in a date, but keep in mind that it doesn't take away from a potential relationship if your date doesn't necessarily walk on the outside when you're walking on a sidewalk or near the road. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it's a really simple solution that can be brought up in the relationship. It's not difficult for your partner to establish that routine once you've established a relationship with them. Other things contribute to the relationship that are much bigger issues and could be red flags, but something like that shouldn't be considered a red flag. It's small enough for you to teach your partner that that's an expectation or standard that you have in the relationship. Now, if you're talking about holding the door open, sometimes that fades in relationships and it's not always maintained. And obviously there are ways for you to communicate that you want that maintained once you're in the relationship. But we're talking about the first date. If he or she doesn't hold the door open for you, a big one that's been, even for me, is when somebody opens the door and they walk through it first and then hold it open so that you can come in behind them. Just keep in mind, if you get to the door first and you open it, maybe you hold it open so that your date can walk through it first and then you go through. It's just a really sweet gesture to say, I'm thinking of you, not of me. When you hold the door open because you've gone through it first, and you do that little back thing where you like hold it open so they can come through, but it's always awkward because your arm's not actually long enough to do that. It looks like you're saying to that person, I think of me first, you're an afterthought. And then subconsciously your date is thinking, oh my God, this is like a preview into our relationship. I'm always going to be an afterthought. So try and get yourself into a habit of thinking of the other person. I'm telling you, if you're always thinking of your partner first, then hopefully you're finding someone who does the same for you. It's not that I'm trying to teach you to give, and forget about your own needs. That's definitely not what I'm saying here, and we're going to talk about that in boundaries. But what I'm suggesting is that if you are leaning into the relationship and they are leaning into the relationship, you are creating this really solid foundation for a healthy relationship. Obviously, if you're giving and they're just taking, it's going to crumble, right? And now we have codependency, which is a whole other course. But for this purpose, I really want you to think about ways that you can be giving on that first date. Can you hold the door open and let them walk through first? For some people, it's opening the car door. Some people don't care. If you are on a date, specifically I see this happening with male-female relationships. If you are on a date with a woman and you open the door for her and she freaks the fuck out because I hold my own door, or I can open my own door, or whatever she might say. But it usually kind of comes with some attitude. It's probably not the person you're looking to be with. So in that respect, it is a red flag. Because if you are the type of person who naturally likes to open the door for your partner, whether it's the front door kind of thing, a store, the car door, and that's part of your routine, that's what you like to do to show the other person that you think of them, that you care about them, and they are highly reactive to it in a negative way, then that is a red flag, because that is telling you you probably aren't going to line up with your values. Now, I'm not saying that cut someone out because that's one red flag. You obviously, they have to pile up, but it's something to take note of. If someone doesn't open the door for you and you like that, it's potentially something they can learn. You'd have to see down the road. But the red flag is when you do that behavior already, you open the door for someone and they are highly reactive to it in a negative way. That is the red flag. Okay. When we talk about other behaviors, let's dive in. Let's dive in hardcore on this one. Who pays for the bill? Because I've done an extensive amount of research and surveyed people on Instagram, on TikTok, on Facebook, in my coaching and other people's coaching groups. I've asked other coaches, other matchmakers. This has been an ongoing research project for me. Who picks up the tab? I know a lot of people have said, and I would say majority of the responses have said, if I ask you on the date, I will pick it up. And I think that's part of the reason why we see a lot of people not necessarily asking for a first date, because they don't really want to drop $100 to $150 on an expensive dinner date with someone if they're not really 100% sure there's going to be something there, which is why, if you've been following me, I say it over and over and over again. If you are meeting on a dating app, I want you to get to the point where you're asking them out on a date immediately. You can have 2 exchanges back and forth of a conversation and then ask for the date. But make the date something very inexpensive. You don't need to be going out on a fancy dinner date for a first date. That first date, the one that you're here to learn about, really should be simple. It should just be an opportunity to see if there's potential for intimacy down the road. That's what dating is. It's getting to know someone on a deeper level to see if there's a possibility for a relationship or for intimacy. It doesn't mean it has to happen on the first date. Which also brings me to, if you are a man and you are paying for the first date, please have 0 expectations. So after that date is done, you should have no expectation from her. If you pay for a dinner date, that's on you. You've made that choice to pick up the tab, and it's very gentleman of you, and I commend you for doing that, but you are not allowed now to have any expectation from her. She does not owe you anything for picking up the bill, okay? I just want to make sure that's really clear to everyone. And if you want to have an expectation, don't pick up the bill. Split it. Do a 50-50 split. I will tell you, though, there are some women that I've done in the research that I've seen that will not give you a second date if you don't pay for the first date. And if you are really adamant about splitting first dates and splitting things throughout the relationship, then maybe she's not for you anyways. And to her, he's probably not for you. Okay? But the big thing is, who pays for that first date? Okay, so like I said, I usually suggest really simple first dates. Try and keep it to an hour, hour and a half, coffee date, walk on the beach, walk in the park, something low key, something that's casual during the day, something that's in a public space so that you can feel safe. These are all things that we've been talking about. If you have decided to do drinks or dinner, or my clients, my matchmaking clients, I set them up on active dates. So axe throwing, or maybe a boat ride through the harbor, or a picnic. Apple picking and picnic was one of them. That was a really cute date. I've never even done it myself. But I sent a couple out on this date where they did apple picking, and then he brought a picnic so that they could sit down and get to know each other. Super cute. They both had a great time. It wasn't necessarily a match romantically, but they both had a really lovely afternoon together. And notice it was an afternoon too. It's really important to keep it during the daylight. However, I know some of you are going to get really excited about some of your first dates, and you're going to want to do a dinner date, and that's okay. But be prepared for who's going to pick that check up, okay? Because if you, I really think this is probably everywhere right now because of where our economy is going, but if you live in a big city, you're probably going to be dropping a good amount of money on that dinner date, especially if either one of you drink or if you both drink. That really can add to it. I know where I live in California, a dinner date is a minimum of $100, and that's keeping it on the cheap. So it's really easy to want to make your first date kind of fancy and feel nice, and maybe get appetizers and get wine. Maybe you want a bottle of wine, or maybe you want to do cocktails. Maybe you want dessert as well, because you're trying to prolong this date, usually, if you're having a good time. So when this happens, then you have this enormous dinner date bill. It comes, this is my suggestion. If this is a male-female, let me rephrase that. If this is a masculine-feminine matchup, okay, then whomever is expecting to not pay this bill should at least offer to split it. If, I'm going to use two women as an example, okay, because I don't want to always have to talk about the male-female side of it, because not all of you are in that situation. And I feel like that's the obvious one. So what we're going to say, I have Erica and Julie. Julie asks Erica on a date. She wants to do a dinner date. She wants to go to this new bistro that just opened up, and it's super cute, but it's a little pricey. And so here's your options. Before the date, make it very obvious, Julie, because you asked Erica out, that you're gonna take her out. Let me take you out. I'm gonna pick it up. This is on me, right? If you don't determine this ahead of time before the date, then your next opportunity is on the date. And in that case, that's when the bill comes, and you can say, Julie to Erica, I got this. I asked you out. Let me get this. Do not, however, say you can get the next one. First of all, how dare you assume there's going to be a next one? Don't do that. That's embarrassing. And it doesn't feel nice when someone says, like, I'll get this one, you get the next one. You're volunteering me to pay for something? What? No. Don't do that, please. Just simply state, I asked you out. Let me get this. This is on me. That's it. And Erica, in exchange, should offer when the bill comes to say, hey, do you want to split this? Or should we split this? Or however you want to word it. And when Julie says, no, I got this. I asked you out. Let me pay for this. And then Erica should just simply say, thank you. That's really kind of you. Or that's sweet. Or whatever you want to say. Use your own language. But show your appreciation. Don't fight them on it. It doesn't mean that sex is in order now, or that you have to kiss the person at the end of the date. There should be no expectation just because someone picked up the bill. Okay? I also will talk about it later, but you know, that expectation of the first kiss. So I don't want to attach it too much here, but I do want you to not feel like you can't let someone pay for the date because there might be an expectation. Or to think that, why should I let them pay for the date? I can afford to pay for myself. Okay, that I want to kind of cover that mentality of, I can pay for myself. Well, okay, but isn't it a nice gesture when someone wants to do something kind for you? And if that's your way of thinking, then why not have it in the back of your mind of, you know what, okay, they're going to pay for this one and I can pick up the next one. If there's a next date, don't say it out loud. Don't assume there's going to be a next date. But you know that, okay, I can afford to pay for my own date. But we're talking about two people coming together and connecting. And in order to connect, we need to do that in different ways. Sometimes during the date, we connect by touching each other. Sometimes we connect by eye contact. Sometimes it's proximity, if we're close to each other. Sometimes people like to sit next to each other in the booth versus across from each other. So people connect in different ways. For some people, they connect by picking up the tab. This is love languages. Do you connect by physical touch? That's that touch when we're talking. Do you connect by words of affirmation, saying that you appreciate them, that they look really nice, that they look gorgeous in that new dress of theirs, whatever it is? Or is it acts of service or gifts, paying for things? So these are all different elements of love languages. And while, yes, they don't know your love language yet, that takes time. But know that when someone offers to pay for dinner for you, it is a love language. Is it your love language? Maybe not. But they don't know that yet. And it's unfair to assume that they should know that. And this is the biggest issue I see with first dates, is thinking that the other person should know all these things about you. But they don't, because the person that they went out with before is nothing like you. And I hate to make this comparison, but people are like snowflakes. No two are ever the same. So go into your dates with that in the back of your mind and remember that. People are like snowflakes. No two are alike. So what you did on one date is not going to land on the next date. Or maybe this time it does, but something else you do doesn't land. You have to learn about each other. The point of a first date is to learn about the other person, is to get to know the other person, to take in all the information about them. Not the other way around, remember? So, when we are talking about chivalrous behaviors on a first date, it is really, really important to keep in mind what your standard is around it. Are you going to write someone off because they don't open the door for you and you really like when they do that? Is it that important to you in a relationship that that behavior happens? And if it is it something that can be addressed later on? Or does it really need to be a first date deal breaker? So I really want you to think about what your expectations are when it comes to chivalry. Who pays? Do they open the door? Do they hold the door for you? Do they walk on the outside? I know there's a ton more. I just, for some reason, am completely spacing on all the rest of the chivalrous behaviors that you could have. But I just make a list. This is your homework. I want you to sit down and make a list of all of the behaviors you can think of. In fact, maybe Google them, because I'm apologizing now. I don't know why. I'm drawing a blank on so many of them. Make a list of all of them. And then I want you to go through them and look to see how important are these. Maybe give them a ranking 1 through 10. Not important, very important, give or take. I don't know. If they walk on the outside, I don't really care. Or you can do check marks next to them, or you can cross them out or circle them or highlight them or however you want to do it. I like this scoring 1 to 10. It gives it a ranking because it's not so black and white. There's some gray areas sometimes. Write them all down, give them a rating, 1 through 10, and then step back and look at it and ask yourself, the ones you gave a 10 to, will they be deal breakers on a first date for you? Are you going to say, I cannot go on a second date with this person because of X, Y, and Z, whatever's on your list, because I ranked these as 10s? Or are they not deal breakers? Are they preferences? So get really clear on that, because that will really help you when you go on a first date with someone to know that, okay, they do this or they don't do this, but it's a perk that they do this. Ooh, it makes me like them even more now. Or they don't do it, but it's okay, because I'm actually looking for different values. I'm looking for a partner who shows up for our relationship. And you know what? So what that they don't pick up the bill all the time, or so what that they don't open the door for me? This is personal preference. I'm not suggesting that you go that direction. I'm saying you need to get clear on what your deal breakers are and what you're willing to accept. Because if you're not clear, your first dates are going to be all over the place. And you're going to try and go on your first dates looking just for a feeling of connection without knowing how to create the connection. So we can't just bank everything on this, well, I'm hoping I'll just know. How many times have some of you gone on first dates and you've had that feeling? Call it a spark, call it a connection, call it a bond, call it an inner knowing, whatever you want to call it. And you get it. That feeling's there and you're like, yes, that's what I was looking for. But the other person doesn't feel that. It's not reciprocated. And you think, well, that sucks. I don't understand what happened. I had the feeling, but the other person didn't have the feeling. Because it's got to be more than just the feeling. Research has shown us that the number of relationships that start with a spark that last and make it into long-term relationships, it's only 11%. 11% is a very low number to base your dates on or to hope for. Instead, maybe your relationship isn't going to start with a spark. Have you ever been in a relationship before that, and I know I'm getting super off topic here, but I think this is important. Have you ever gotten into a relationship and when you look back, you realize that it was a slow burn? You met at work, you got to know each other over time, or you were friends in a friend group, or you both were going to the same networking events all the time and you kept running into each other. These are slow burns. These are great ways to start a very healthy relationship. So not all relationships have to start with the spark, okay? I know, I got off on a tangent there. My apologies. I feel very strongly about the spark thing if you hadn't noticed. But I just wanted to make sure that we had a nice in-depth conversation about, you know, the expectation of chivalry on the first date. And I do think that who picks up the bill for the date is included in that whole, if it's chivalrous or not. Like I said, the best way is to talk about it in advance before you meet. You know, if you've matched on an app, this is a good opportunity to ask, what's your expectation for a first date? You know, do you expect the other person to pay? If you ask like that, though, you could run the risk of the other person saying like, no, of course I don't expect you to pay. And then you go on the first date and you go, great, let's split it. And they're like, oh, wow, okay. Because they don't want to seem like a gold digger, or they don't want to seem like they're money motivated. Maybe you have a really good job and you've talked about that and they're really concerned now that you're going to think they're only interested in you for money. So be careful of how you ask these types of questions. But I think the best way to go about it, if you are the one who's asking them and you want to pick up the bill, this is if you want to simply just put them at ease, to say like, hey, I would love to take you out to dinner and I want a treat, or however you want to word it. Use your own language, make sure it sounds like you. It has to be authentic. But there's nothing wrong with bringing up the conversation ahead of time. Is it a little weird and awkward? Sure. Now, if you're on a date and you're the one who's expecting them to pick up the bill and they say, no, let's split it. And you're thinking, okay, well, this isn't, this is bringing me down a notch on whether or not I'm attracted to this person. I want you to really think about whether or not you have other values in common with this person before you decide, I don't want a second date with them. I really want somebody who's going to pick up the bill. And to think about how it's an unfair expectation because you've never made it clear to them. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I went on a date with this guy, and we split the first date. We split it, and I was a little disappointed, but he was cute and he was really sweet, and so I thought, I'm just gonna do a second date. Let's just see what happens. Second date came and went, and the same thing kind of happened again, and I thought, God, this is really tough for me. I like that feeling of the guy taking charge on the dates and, paying for it. I don't know. There's something very old-fashioned about it. I'm a little old-fashioned when I date. So I had a really hard time with it, but I really liked him otherwise. And I don't know, maybe date 3, 4, something like that. We actually ended up having a conversation about it. And he ended up saying like, hey, if I had known it could have been a deal breaker and I wouldn't have gotten a second date, he's like, I would have absolutely paid for that first date. But I didn't know that would have been a deal breaker for you. And it almost was. The old me would have been, but this is the new improved me, much older. And so I didn't allow that to be a deal breaker for me. Also, later on down the road in our relationship, he disclosed that he was having some money issues. Nothing that would have been alarming or nothing that I had to be concerned about, but that he was putting himself on a really tight budget to pay off some old debt. And that's unfair of me, because down the road, had we worked out, we didn't work out, mostly just not because of the money stuff. It was because of moving and whatever. The point is that at this point in his life, he's probably doing really well because he put himself on this strict budget and paid off his debts and was able to get ahead, and he had goals, he had ambitions, he had, an idea of where he wanted to be in the end when he was done. It just so happened that I met him at a point of his life where he was putting himself on a very strict money diet. And so I just don't think it's fair necessarily to judge someone's character based off of something so small. Now, if it really means a lot to you and there's other things that are red flags, then that's your choice. So it is up to you on how you are going to go into the first date and what your mindset is. If that is a 10 for you, that the other person pays, then own that. Own it 100%. And I'm not saying you have to tell them that you have that expectation, but own it for yourself. Have that clarity on that first date that look, I have this high expectation from them. I expect you to pick up the tab, and I expect you to open my door, or I expect you to, what is wrong with me? I can't think of any of them. It's okay if that is your personality and that is what your expectation is. I want you to just be clear on it and own it. Be your authentic self. But when you do this exercise, if you sit down and you look at it and you realize, maybe I don't need those things. Maybe there are other things in the relationship that are worth more to me. Then I want you to consider that as well. The point of this activity is just simply so that you can have very clear ideas of what your expectation is around chivalry for your first date. So good luck with the activity, and hopefully you get some clarity from it, and I'll see you in the next video.